I was just a young lady when the war started. Being only 17 years old at the time, I did not understand exactly what my country was going through. It might have stayed that way for a little longer, but my father decided that he was going to do his part in the war and protect his family and country for glory and honor. It is my duty, he would say to my mother as she begged him to change his mind. He was set in his ways, however. He was going to leave the next day, no matter what was said. And so it happened. On a hot, sunny day in the middle of summer, the streets crowded with people saying farewell to their loved ones, and my father kissed each of us 3 kids on the forehead as my mother's eyes filled with tears. Joining the procession of men marching down the road, he waved to us as he proudly marched down the city streets on his way to serve his country. Little did I know that would be the last day I would ever see my father again. We received word a while after his letter stops that he would be coming home. We laid him in the ground not too long after that. My mother was heartbroken. She wouldn't eat or drink and rarely slept. She would just sit by the window holding a worn and tear-stained letter. One by one, my brothers soon came of age and were drafted in the military. They gladly left to serve. It was only my mother and I left. She was finally getting over the shock of my father's passing, and she would have fought to keep my brothers home, but she didn't have any strength left. I stayed another year, but soon came my time to leave. I learned from one of the elders that I worked with that the women were needed as nurses. I have always had a natural talent healing people, so I figured what better way to put that talent to use than to use it saving the lives of the soldiers who were fighting for my freedom. I felt guilty about leaving my mother alone, but I finally got my chance to help, and I wasn't going to let it pass by. It was supposed to be easy. I would sign up and stitch a few wounds, and nurse people back to health. It was that thinking that made the truth so hard to handle. After getting proper training, I was sent across the seas and put to work immediately. I was stationed at a hospital in Great Britain that took in those who weren't too badly injured. They would only need a stitch here and maybe pop a joint back into place there. Nothing too bad. I enjoyed my work and was positive I made the right decision. Not too long after my arrival, the war picked up pace, and almost every hospital that sided with the Allies would have to send nurses to the front lines. I was never hoping to be assigned to the front lines. No one does. It happened, though, and there was nothing that I could do about it. I had no idea what to expect, and what I found waiting for me haunts my dreams to this very day. I had at least believed that there was going to be a hospital to house the wounded, but all I found were some dingy tents strewn up in a clearing. I was hustled into the middle of things, along with all the other nurses that I had just spent hours with on the truck that brought us here. I was the youngest among them, and they all thought that I wouldn't have the talent most get only after years of practice to heal someone suffering from wounds only war could deliver. I had many doubts myself, but I was here, so I would do the best that I could. Stepping into one of the tents, I was bombarded with the horror of what war was really about. There was barely any space to walk between the stretchers, and the tent reeked of blood and a mixture of other things I could only guess at. The other nurses and I were all hoping to be able to settle into our new home before we got to work. But by the looks of things, that wouldn't happen for a while. It was the first of a series of long, sleepless nights in my life. I lost track of how many wounds I pieced together and how many soldiers sat in front of me permanently disabled. I saw wounds I didn't even know were possible to inflict upon a body, and many others that were so terrible that to even try to describe what they were like would only just barely scratch the surface of how horrible they really were. Some days would be slower than others, but we always had soldiers pouring in our camp, night or day. It didn't matter. War never slept, so neither did we. We would gain patients faster than trucks could take them to somewhere safer. We all worked as fast as we could without making any mistakes, but it never seemed to be fast enough. After a year or so, the front shifted and the people pouring into our camp lessened. I was finally able to take care of my patients like a nurse should. This only lasted a few weeks. A call came in one day saying that we needed to pack up. We were needed elsewhere. So we gathered our supplies and headed to Hawaii. Being so close to the war, you would think that we would know about most of the major enemy raids, but a shock to everyone I worked with to hear about the most recent attack that wounded thousands and killed even more. An attack that in the future would simply be called Pearl Harbor. It was absolute chaos upon arrival. People were screaming, buildings were reduced to rubble, and there seemed to be no medical base. Doctors and nurses were just floating along the disaster, tending to anyone that they could before moving on to someone else. After consulting with a few nurses I caught as they hustled along with their duties, my suspicions were confirmed. There was no one in charge, and everyone was just doing the only thing that they knew how to do: tend to those who were broken. Before everyone could depart among the shambles, I gathered together a group of nurses to help me set to a task that should have been done a long time ago. Finding the clearest, flattest spot that we could, we set to making an area to take the wounded. It didn't help to patch them up, then leave them lying in the streets. We cleared larger and larger areas, setting up tents and making sense to all the chaos. We soon had the injured brought to the camp by the hundreds, and we could finally see some progress, but we still had a long ways to go. Our base had to multiply to be able to fit all the people that were coming in from the ruins. Looking for survivors one day, I heard a little voice call out from a pile of beams. Tearing away a piece of tin that had lodged between two boards, I saw a dirty little face peering at me from between two timbers. Tears created tracks in the dust on her face when she saw me. Some others came to help me remove her from her prison, but no matter what we did, the beams would not budge. There was no hope. I fell to my knees and looked that little girl right in the eyes, expecting to hear her cry out, but instead, all she did was take a pink ribbon from her hair and hold it out to me, a token of thanks for trying. I sat with her all night, holding her hand and singing the lullabies that my mother used to sing to me. She didn't care she was about to die. She was just happy to have a hand to hold again. She passed on when the first rays of light hit the land. That night, I was shown a side of war I would never like to see again. People honor their soldiers when they give their lives, but civilians are rarely noticed when they are killed in the midst of war.